Glad to be with you.
Well, I wanted to talk with you because a number of reports out there about conflict, this by Russia into Ukraine. Um, there have been these amazing. Tell us about that.
Well, I've been talking about this, but last week I talked to our CBN Ukraine director and I said, "Look, tell me, are there any miracles going on?" He said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, there are. There was a member of our church whose son went to the front lines and he and his battle group were facing the Russians, and he called his dad on a cell phone. They still have cell phone service. And he said, Dad, you've got to get people in the church praying because I don't know if we're going to make it through this. We are fighting overwhelming odds here. The Russians are just so large, and they have all this mechanical equipment, tanks, and armored personnel carriers, and anti-air stuff. Every you name it, artillery." And he said, "I don't know if we're going to make it." So the father got off the church, and they started for their men in the field and for this man's son. And the son called back later in the evening. He said, "Dad, you wouldn't believe it. It was like a UFO or something. We've never seen anything like it. Just a brilliant flash of lightning in the sky, just taking over the whole sky. We haven't seen that. We thought maybe the Americans or somebody had a weapon they were using, but we haven't seen this." And then the next morning they woke up. And I've got to say, it kind of remember, the Lord had him whittle down the army to about 300 men. They were facing 135,000 Midianites. And Gideon said, "How are we ever going to beat, these guys?" Kind of like the Ukrainians with the
Yeah,
Russians.
yeah.
And God intervened. They went to camp of the enemy of the Midianites, and the Midianites became confused and started fighting one another. And that leads me to those of war. We defeated the Ukrainians. This is a souvenir we can take home. And they were on the way to meet up with another battle tank group. And when they did, that group thought they were Ukrainians, so they opened fire on them. So very much like Gideon's army fighting one another,
Well, and I
God
know.
confusing them.
Well, I was gonna say in that story, I know there were some prayers going out, for the Russians to sort of fight one another, to turn on one another in some way. So it was interesting to hear that story. And as by the different reports or not, as Christians taking a step back, when we read scripture and we see what is possible with God, when we look at a situation going on in real time, we should believe that any of these things are possible, right?
Well, we should, and I think it's encouraging to Christians, even if it's been embellished a little bit. It encourages us in our faith. I've got to say, Billy, as a believer, I also feel bad for the Russians. I mean, I can't imagine Russians turning their tanks on one another and just slaughtering one another. I mean, it's bad enough fighting an enemy, but to do that to one another. And I feel for the family member. I've been to Russia a number of times. I feel for the family members, the parents, the grandparents, the children, the moms, the dads, right?
Yeah.
Spouses.
Absolutely. And you bring up a really important point too, that in these issues it's very easy to only talk about prayer for one side, right? You want to pray for everybody involved. There are Russian citizens here, there are people in the military, there are lots of people who are not happy that
I mean, I think of Russians too. The average Russian, the sanctions are going to hurt them. It's not going to hurt the oligarchs. It's gonna not going to hurt Putin. These men have tremendous wealth. The sanctions are not going to hurt them. It's going to hurt the average Russian. I know we have to do it, but it hurts them. And when they bury soldiers, it doesn't matter which side you're on. It's tragic for all involved.
Just as we round out to the end here, one of the other elements of this, into almost a 2-week period now that this has been going on,